The candlelight on the reception table made everything look too perfect. Like one of those magazine spreads where nobody sweats, nobody ages, and everyone smiles because they've never had to work a day in their life. I sat near the end, in a suit that still smelled faintly of mothballs and memory, trying to figure out when exactly I'd stopped belonging at my own daughter's table. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button. Also tell us in the comments, what time is it where you are right now and which city are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. The laughter at the center of the table swelled again. Champagne glasses clinked. My daughter's new husband was telling some story about learning humility on his first trip to Europe, and everyone around him nodded like disciples at the sermon of a wealthy prophet. He caught me watching. "Oh, don't worry, Frank," he said loudly, just enough to hush the table. "We'll teach you how to eat escargot one day. Might take a while to find a fork that fits those working-class hands." Laughter followed, polite and sharp-edged. Even my daughter smiled, small, uncertain, but enough to tell me she wasn't ready to stop him. That hurt more than the words. I took a sip of water that tasted like the end of something. "I'll stick with meat and potatoes," I said quietly. It should have ended there. But his mother, an ice queen wrapped in pearls, leaned forward. "My dear, people like your father always find comfort in simple things." The table froze between pity and amusement. My daughter looked away. The waiter came by to pour more wine, and I watched the glass tilt, the red catching the candlelight. For a moment I saw my wife's face in that reflection, her tired smile at 100 dinners just like this, where we'd been reminded of what we didn't have and what we'd earned anyway. She'd have told me to stand up straight, say thank you, and leave before they noticed I'd stopped pretending to belong. So I did. I folded my napkin, set it neatly beside the untouched bread plate, and stood. "Congratulations again," I said to my daughter. She looked startled, then relieved, like I'd taken away the discomfort she couldn't name. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice small. "Home," I said. Her husband's smirk widened. "It's still early, but hey, if you're tired, we understand. Big day for everyone." Something in me hardened. Not anger, just final clarity. "Yes," I said, "a very big day." As I turned, her voice followed softly, almost lost in the clatter of silverware. "You don't belong in this family anymore." I didn't answer. There are moments when silence says everything you'll ever need to. Outside, the night air cut through my shirt, the wind carrying music from the hall. A song my wife had loved, one we used to dance to in the kitchen when nobody was watching. I stood by my old pickup truck, listening to it fade. The parking lot was full of expensive cars, black mirrors gleaming under the moonlight. I ran my hand over the hood of my rusted Ford, its surface rough with the kind of years that polish can't hide. When I turned the key, the engine coughed awake like an old friend clearing his throat. The road home wound along the bay, quiet, dark, honest. By the time I reached the house, the ocean mist had settled over the porch railings like smoke. The mailbox still had her name carved into the side. My wife's name. She'd been gone 7 years, but I hadn't been able to paint over it. Maybe I never would. Inside, the house smelled faintly of pine and coffee grounds. Everything where it always was, her photo above the mantel, my fire department jacket on the hook by the door, boots lined up beneath it like obedient soldiers. I hung up my tie, turned off the porch light, and sat down at the kitchen table. That's when I saw the envelope. It had been tucked behind the old recipe box, sealed with the faint outline of my wife's handwriting. "For when Lauren gets married." I held it for a long time before opening it. The paper was thin, brittle from years of waiting. "If you're reading this, she's found someone she thinks she loves. Promise me you'll remember this. No one's family is perfect, but love shouldn't cost you your self-respect. Don't let anyone make her feel like she needs their approval to belong, not even him. Especially not him. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands shook, not from grief, but from the echo of a warning I'd ignored without even knowing it. In the drawer beside the table sat a folder I hadn't touched in years. The one with her trust documents. It was supposed to be locked until Lauren's 35th birthday, a cushion built from my wife's careful saving and insurance payouts after she died. But I noticed something strange. One of the pages missing, a signature line torn out cleanly. My stomach tightened. I logged onto the old desktop computer in the corner, typed in the bank's website, tried the login I hadn't used since we set up the account. Still active, but there had been withdrawals. 2 months ago, not by me. The numbers didn't lie. $50,000 gone. I sat there staring at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was asking me what I planned to do next. Outside, the tide had started to rise. The waves brushed against the rocks below the porch. Steady, unhurried, inevitable. I knew that rhythm well. Firefighters have a saying, when smoke starts curling under the door, it's already too late to pretend it's just a candle. Whatever had begun at that dinner table wasn't over, it was only the first spark, and I'd spent a lifetime learning how to put out fires, one careful breath at a time. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of coastal light that makes everything look honest whether you want it to or not. I hadn't slept. The letter from my wife still lay open on the table, its edges curled where my hands had held it too long. The computer screen had gone dark hours ago, but that missing money burned brighter than any flame I'd ever faced. I brewed coffee, real coffee, percolator kind, the way she used to make it, and watched the steam rise. Steam always tells the truth. It doesn't care who's watching. $50,000. Gone. Signed for by someone who wasn't me. I opened the old filing cabinet beside the fridge and pulled out the trust binder. Yellowed tabs, faint scent of dust and neglect. Each page was a map of my wife's love. Every deposit, every notarized note, every cautious instruction to protect our daughter's future. Near the back, a photocopy of the original agreement showed a witness signature I didn't recognize. A lawyer's office from Boston. I called the number printed in the corner. A machine answered, polished and empty. The Kensington Law Group has merged with Elliott and Farr Associates. For immediate assistance, press 2. Elliott. The name landed like a nail hitting metal. My son-in-law's last name wasn't a coincidence. It was a flag waving in the smoke. I pressed 2. A young voice picked up, too cheerful for a Monday. Elliott and Farr, this is Megan. Morning. I'm trying to reach whoever handles client trust accounts. File number W3728 under Lauren Thompson. May I ask who's calling? Her father, Frank Thompson. The pause on the other end lasted a little too long. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but that account shows limited access. Only signatories may receive balance information. Limited to who? I can't disclose that, sir. You already did, I said, and hung up. The coffee had gone cold. I walked to the porch, the chill salt air cutting through my shirt. My wife's letter fluttered on the table behind me like a small voice insisting on being heard. Don't let anyone make her feel like she needs their approval to belong. Approval. That was the currency that man's family dealt in. I'd watched them buy it one compliment at a time. I drove into town. The bank opened at 9. I was waiting when the manager flipped the sign to open. He knew me. Everyone did. 43 years fighting fires in this town leaves a certain smell that never washes out. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed like insects. I handed him my ID and the trust documents. I need to see the last withdrawals from this account. He frowned. Frank, this fund's restricted. It requires dual authorization, yours and your daughter's. So if I didn't authorize it, then someone forged it." He lowered his voice. "You didn't hear that from me, but the signature on this looks laser printed, not ink." I thanked him, left, and sat in the truck staring at the steering wheel. Somewhere between my wife's grave and my daughter's wedding, someone had learned how to sign my name better than I could. At the diner down the street, old Tom Calder sat in his usual booth. He used to be the city's building inspector before his eyesight went, and he still knew how to read people like blueprints. He looked up from his eggs. "You look like a man with a fire starting behind the walls." I slid into the booth. "You ever hear of a firm called Elliott and Farr?" "Yeah, big money contractors, mostly real estate shell games. They bought a bunch of downtown permits last spring. Why?" "My son-in-law's family." Tom whistled low. "You better check where your daughter's name shows up. They file joint loans through spouses. Seen it before. Makes the paper trail look cleaner." He pulled a pen from his pocket and scribbled an address. "County Records Office. Ask for Marta. She owes me a favor." By noon, I was standing under the hum of old fluorescent lights again, this time surrounded by file cabinets and dust. Marta found the file in 10 minutes flat. "Here we go. Property number 8824 Bayview Drive. Mortgage signed 6 months ago by Elliott and Lauren Thompson." "Mortgage? On what property?" She turned the monitor. "Your daughter's new condo. Appraised at $700,000, loan amount $650. Co-signed using collateral from an auxiliary trust." Auxiliary trust. My wife's fund had been renamed. I felt the floor tilt under me. "Can I get a copy?" "Technically, no," she said, then slid the paper through the slot anyway. "But I never saw you." I walked out into the thin coastal sunlight, clutching the document like evidence from a crime scene. My daughter's signature looked hesitant, half-drawn, as if her hand had been guided. Back home, I laid the paper beside the letter. The handwriting of the woman I'd loved and the forgery pretending to be me sat inches apart. One real, one rotten. I opened the drawer again and pulled out the old photo of the three of us, me, my wife, and a 10-year-old girl holding a sparkler. The firelight on her face was all trust and wonder. I whispered to the picture, "You deserved better than this." That night the phone rang. Her voice came small through the static. "Dad, could you stop by tomorrow? Elliot's family wants to talk about merging some of Mom's accounts, and he said it would be good if you could sign a few things." I stared at the receiver. "Sure," I said, calm as rain before a storm. "I'll bring my pen." After she hung up, I sat there in the dark kitchen, the ocean pounding against the rocks below, steady as a heartbeat. The firefighter in me knew the signs, smoke curling under the door again. This time I wasn't going to wait for the alarm. I opened my notebook, the one I used to track house calls back in the department, and wrote the first line of a new list. 1. Find out how deep the fire runs. 2. Protect Lauren, even if she hates me for it. 3. Never let them see me angry. Anger clouds judgment. Calm makes a oxygen. And I had a feeling I was going to need to breathe carefully before this was over. By sunrise the next day I was already on the road, the thermos of black coffee riding shotgun and the sea fog sliding across the windshield like memory made visible. The house behind me looked smaller every mile I drove, but I wasn't leaving it behind. I was protecting what was left of it. Tom's shop sat on the edge of town, a squat cinderblock garage that smelled of sawdust, diesel, and secrets. He was already there, sitting on a stool with yesterday's newspaper and a cigarette he hadn't bothered to light. "You look worse than the coffee you drink," he said. "I've got work." I handed him the photocopy of the mortgage and the bank printout. He studied them without a word. "That signature of yours looks cleaner than your handwriting ever was." Laser printer? Bank manager said the same. Tom grunted, pulled open an old metal file cabinet and fished out a manila folder. Elliott's construction company pulled 6 safety permits last year. 2 failed inspection, but the reports disappeared before the fines were issued. He slid a thumb across a column of dates. They were signed off by a county sub-inspector named Reed. Reed retired 3 months ago, right after cashing out on a new truck and a beach cottage. Bribed? Let's call it encouraged to retire. I felt that low thrum inside, the one every firefighter knows when the smoke's visible but the flames aren't yet. I leaned over the pages. You think he's laundering through those projects? Tom nodded slowly. Wouldn't be the first time. The new money types like to mix their dirt with cement. He pulled out his phone and snapped photos of the documents. I'll reach out to a friend at the planning office, quiet-like. I left the shop and drove toward the city. The highway shimmered with heat, a mirage of calm. Every mile I kept hearing my daughter's voice from that call, soft, trusting, unknowing. She'd said Elliott's family wants to talk about merging some of Mom's accounts. The word merging stuck like a splinter. At a rest stop, I dialed the number printed at the bottom of the mortgage page. A receptionist answered. Kensington Property Holdings, how may I help you? I'm trying to confirm the responsible agent for file number 8824, Bayview Drive, I said. One moment. Keyboard clicks. Then, that property's managed by Elliott Farr, senior partner. The world went quiet around me. Not noise quiet, soul quiet, the kind that comes right before a roof gives way. When I reached home that afternoon, there was an envelope taped to my door, expensive stationery, embossed logo. Elliott and Farr Associates. Inside, an invitation. Dinner, tomorrow night. To discuss the family trust and future collaborations. They wanted me close enough to sign something, close enough to control. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter and stared at the handwriting. Elegant, sterile, certain. The kind of penmanship that never had to fight for anything. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out the old radio the department had given me when I retired. Its antenna was bent, but the reception still caught the late-night dispatch channel. The static whispered like an old friend. Structure fire, moderate smoke showing. Engine 2 responding. My heartbeat matched the rhythm. You can take the man out of the firehouse, but you can't take the firehouse out of the man. The next morning I called Tom. You free tonight? For you? Always. What's burning? I've been invited to dinner. He laughed. Try not to light the place yourself. Can you follow the paper trail if I get you photos of whatever they put in front of me? Send me clear shots, both sides, no flash, I'll handle the rest. At 6 sharp, I drove into the city, polished my boots, and wore the only suit that still fit. The restaurant was one of those glass front places where you can smell the money before the food. Elliott greeted me at the door with that polished grin that doesn't touch the eyes. Glad you came, Frank. We just want to make sure the transition with Lauren's accounts is smooth. He guided me to a private room where 2 men in tailored suits waited. One of them extended a hand. Mr. Thompson, I'm Richard Farr. The name matched the letterhead. They talked about portfolio diversification and joint asset management. Words meant to lull, not inform. A waiter poured wine I didn't drink. I nodded, feigned confusion, played the old man they expected. When they finally slid the papers across the table, I adjusted my glasses and took my time. The heading read, Trust Consolidation Agreement. In small print at the bottom, authorization of co-signer, Lauren Thompson, Frank Thompson. But below that, smaller still, a clause, power of attorney transferred to Elliott Farr in the event of incapacitation or absence of co-signer. Absence. Like walking out of a dinner once was enough to make me vanish. I lifted my phone, pretending to check the time, and snapped 3 quick photos before placing it face down. "Looks straightforward," I said, signing nothing. "Mind if I take this home to read properly?" Elliot's smile stiffened. "These things move faster if we sign tonight." "I'm old-fashioned. I read before I sign." He leaned forward, that glint of challenge back in his eyes. "You still don't trust us, do you?" "I trust fire," I said. "It always shows you what it's made of." He didn't understand, but Farr did. The older man's eyes narrowed, calculating risk. "Let's reconvene when you're comfortable, Mr. Thompson." I stood, buttoned my jacket, and left before they could change their minds. Outside, the air was cool, the city lights flickering off the harbor. I texted the photos to Tom. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "These are fraudulent. They're trying to transfer the trust entirely. It's a takeover, not a merger." I exhaled slowly, watching the vapor leave my mouth like smoke. The firefighter in me whispered, "You found the ignition point." Driving home, I rehearsed what I'd tell my daughter, how I'd prove it without breaking her heart. Because if there's one thing worse than fighting a fire, it's knowing someone you love started it without meaning to. At home, I spread the documents on the table beside my wife's letter. Her words seemed to glow under the lamp. "Don't let anyone make her feel she needs their approval to belong." "I'm trying," I said to the empty kitchen. "I'm trying, honey." Outside, the wind rose from the ocean, carrying the faint smell of salt and rain. It rattled the windows like distant applause. The first real storm of the season was coming. I could feel the pressure drop in my knees. But this time, I wasn't boarding up the house. I was waiting, with evidence, with allies, with purpose. Because somewhere between that forged signature and tonight's dinner, the fire had finally found its oxygen. And I was done pretending there wasn't smoke. Rain began sometime before dawn, a steady whisper against the roof that sounded like somebody trying not to wake the house. I lay on the couch with the papers spread across the coffee table, reading every clause until the words blurred into shapes. The storm outside beat time with my heart, slow, relentless, patient. When I finally slept, it wasn't for long. The phone woke me at 8. "Dad, it's me." My daughter's voice was thin, tired. "Elliot says you took some of the trust paperwork. He's worried you might be confused." There it was again. That quiet substitution of truth with concern. "I'm not confused," I said. "I'm careful. There's a difference. He just wants to make sure we're all on the same page. We're not even reading the same book, sweetheart." A pause. Then she sighed. "Could you come by tonight? Please, we can talk without the lawyers." "I'll be there." When I hung up, the silence in the house was heavier than the rain. I packed the documents into a weatherproof folder, slid it into my jacket, and left early. The drive to their condo wound along the coastline, water sheeting across the windshield in sudden bursts. I knew that feeling, the atmosphere about to break into lightning. They lived on the top floor of a new glass and concrete building that looked like it had never been touched by wind. I buzzed up. She opened the door before the chime stopped echoing. The apartment smelled like lilies and expensive varnish, the kind of smell that never lasts because it never belonged. "Dad, come in." Her smile trembled. She looked older than she had at the wedding, eyes ringed in sleepless shadow. Elliot wasn't home, or at least that's what I thought until his voice floated from the balcony. He made it. He stepped inside, phone still in his hand, the grin fixed in place. "We were just talking about you." "Then I saved you the trouble of lying twice," I said. He laughed softly. "Still the comedian." My daughter touched my arm. "Please, don't start." I laid the folder on the counter. "These documents are fake. You know that, right?" She frowned. Elliot said they were preliminary drafts. Drafts don't steal signatures. Elliot's tone cooled. Mr. Thompson, I'm trying to build a future for your daughter. These papers ensure the trust grows instead of rotting in some low-yield account. You should be thanking me. Funny thing about rot, I said. It starts under the paint. He stepped closer. You're implying fraud. Be careful, old man. I've been careful all my life, that's why I'm still standing. My daughter looked between us like a referee who'd forgotten the rules. Enough, both of you. Her eyes filled. Dad, why can't you just let us handle our own life? Because you're drowning and you think it's a bath, I wanted to say. Instead, I just nodded, picked up the folder, and left. Outside, the rain had eased to a mist. I stood under the awning until my heartbeat slowed. Sometimes retreat isn't surrender, it's regrouping. Back in the truck, I called Tom. He's doubling down. She's siding with him. That's temporary, Tom said. I pulled the permit logs you asked for. You'll want to see these. We met at his shop again. He spread out a series of photocopies across the hood of his truck. See these inspection numbers? They correspond to one project, Bayview Condos. Guess whose name's on the emergency safety clearance? I didn't need to guess. Your daughter's. My stomach tightened. He's using her signature for the fraud filings now. Tom nodded grimly. If this hits the state board, she could be liable too. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I said, we protect her first. He looked at me, the way only an old friend can when he's about to ask the hard question. Frank, what if protecting her means burning everything down, including her marriage? Then we light it slow and make sure she's out of the building first. That night, the storm came back. Lightning crawled along the horizon, thunder rolling over the bay. I sat by the window, the glow of my phone illuminating the table. An email notification blinked from an address I didn't recognize. Read, retired a postmail. Heard you're asking about me. Meet me tomorrow noon, Harbor Diner, cash only, no cops. I stared at it until the thunder cracked again. Reed, the inspector Tom had mentioned, the man who'd signed off the falsified reports. I forwarded the message to Tom and typed back one line. I'll be there. Sleep never came. Instead, I wrote another list in my notebook. 4. Meet Reed. Find proof. 5. Keep Lauren's name clear. 6. Don't let rage write the ending. At 11:50 the next day, I walked into the Harbor Diner. Reed was waiting in the back booth, face sunbaked, eyes bloodshot, a man who'd traded conscience for comfort. He looked up, nervous. You Frank Thompson? I am. He slid a small flash drive across the table. Everything's on there, emails, payment receipts, photos of falsified sites. Farr and Elliot paid me cash to sign the forms. I thought it was harmless paperwork until I heard about the mortgage in your daughter's name. Why tell me now? Guilt's bad for blood pressure. He pocketed the envelope I'd brought, $500, my emergency cash stash, and left without finishing his coffee. I watched him go, then slipped the drive into my jacket. Back in the truck, I called Tom. We've got proof. Good. Now we just need timing. Timing. Firefighters live by it. Wait too long and a spark becomes a funeral. Move too soon and the whole structure collapses on top of you. I decided on tomorrow. Tomorrow I'd tell my daughter everything. Show her the papers, the forged signatures, the payoffs. She'd hate me for a day, maybe a week, but hate fades faster than shame. That evening I walked the shoreline behind my house, the tide crawling up the sand like it was searching for something it had lost. I thought about my wife, how she'd always known when to speak and when to let silence do the work. Her voice lived somewhere in the wind now, steady as a heartbeat. Don't let them make her feel small. I won't, I whispered. Lightning flickered again, far out at sea, the kind that stays inside the clouds. It reminded me of hidden danger, brilliant but contained. Tomorrow would bring the first open flame, and I was ready to fight it. By dawn, the storm had emptied itself and the air felt rinsed clean, as if the sky had burned away everything false. I sat at the kitchen table with the flash drive Reed had given me, its black plastic shell reflecting the window light like a single stubborn coal that refused to go cold. I plugged it into my old laptop and waited for the screen to wake. Folder after folder opened, emails, invoices, inspection reports, even photographs of half-finished buildings stamped cleared for occupancy. My daughter's name appeared in 3 of them. It hit me like a fist. Elliot hadn't just stolen from us, he had built his empire on her forged signature. I copied everything to a thumb drive of my own and called Tom. "We're done watching the smoke," I said. "It's time we let the right people see the fire." He met me 2 hours later outside the courthouse, wind snapping his raincoat like a flag. "You sure about this, Frank? Once it's in the system, you can't pull it back." I thought about my wife's letter, the promise folded between the lines. She wanted her daughter safe. That's what this is. We walked inside, together. At the clerk's desk, I filed a formal complaint, attached the digital files, and requested an audit through the State Board of Safety and Licensing. Paper, signatures, timestamp. Simple things, but when you line them up just right, they can cut through steel. By the time we stepped back into the daylight, I felt lighter. The fight wasn't over, but at least the match had been struck. That afternoon, I drove to the local newspaper. The editor, Marcy Halden, used to cover my department back when fires made the front page. She still wore her hair short and practical, still smelled faintly of ink and coffee. "Frank Thompson," she said, shaking my hand. "I heard you retired to fishing and quiet mornings. What brings you to my cluttered little office?" "Truth," I said, "and maybe a little justice." I laid out the evidence. She read fast, eyes narrowing with each document. When she finished, she whistled low. "This is felony-grade fraud. You want me to print it?" "Not until the board confirms it, but I want people to know the name when the charges hit." She nodded. "You've still got good timing." That night, as I was locking up the house, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Thompson," the voice said, smooth and practiced. "This is Richard Farr. I think we should talk before this gets unpleasant." "It's already unpleasant," I said. "I can make it disappear. You'll keep the house, your daughter's accounts stay intact, and no one has to know about any misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings don't usually come with forged signatures." A pause. "Careful, old man. Fire spreads both ways." He hung up. I stood in the dark kitchen listening to the dial tone. He thought he was warning me, but what he'd really done was confirm he smelled the smoke too. By the weekend, things started moving fast. Inspectors arrived at Elliot's office downtown, flanked by state police. Trucks came and went. Cameras followed. The evening news ran a teaser. Local developer under investigation for safety violations and fraud. They didn't use his full name yet, but they would. I watched the broadcast in silence. The anchors moved on to the weather without realizing they'd just pronounced the beginning of the end. A knock rattled the door. Tom stood outside, soaked from the drizzle, grin crooked. "You lit the match, buddy. They're freezing his assets by morning." Before I could answer, headlights swept across the yard. A black SUV rolled to a stop. Elliot stepped out, face tight, expensive coat pulled against the rain. He walked straight to the porch. "Stay here," I told Tom. Elliot didn't wait for an invitation. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he hissed. "You just destroyed your daughter's life." I looked at him calm as I'd ever been. "No, son. You destroyed it yourself." He stepped closer, rain beating on his cheeks like sweat. "You want money? Fine. I'll cut you in." But you pull that complaint, right now. I don't want your money. I want my daughter free of you. His hand twitched like he wanted to hit something but didn't know how. She'll never forgive you. She doesn't need to. She just needs to wake up. A car door slammed behind him. My daughter's voice cut through the rain. Elliot? She'd followed him, still in her work clothes, hair pulled back, eyes wide. He turned, startled. Go back to the car. No, she said, voice breaking. What are you doing here? I stepped aside so she could see the papers spread across my table through the open door. He's trying to buy silence, I said quietly. Her gaze flicked from me to him. Is it true? Elliot's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He's twisting everything. She walked past him, picked up one of the documents, read the signatures. Her hands started to shake. This is my name. He forged it, I said. She looked at me then, eyes wet, voice small. Dad, is this why you left the wedding dinner? I nodded. It started there. She turned back to Elliot. Tell me this isn't real. He reached for her, but she stepped away. Lauren, listen. Don't call me that. She dropped the papers onto the porch, pages scattering in the wind. Then she walked to her car without another word. The sound of the door slamming echoed down the street. Elliot glared at me, all pretense gone. You just made a very powerful enemy. I met his gaze. I've fought worse fires than you. He left without another word. The SUV fishtailed in the wet gravel and vanished down the road. Tom exhaled. Well, he said, that escalated. Yeah, I said, watching the taillights disappear. But sometimes a fire has to burn through before the ground's clean enough to rebuild. Inside, the house felt warmer, though I hadn't touched the thermostat. I picked up the scattered papers, set them on the table, and poured 2 cups of coffee. Tom raised his in a quiet salute. To slow burns and solid ground, I nodded, and to not running from the smoke. Later that night, when I finally sat alone again, the phone buzzed once more, this time from a number I knew. Lauren, I need to talk. Tomorrow morning. At your place. I stared at the screen until the message dimmed. Then I whispered to the empty room. The fire's coming home. Morning came wrapped in fog. The bay was a sheet of pewter, soundless except for gulls somewhere out past the harbor wall. I brewed coffee and waited. Every movement in that quiet house felt deliberate, cup to saucer, chair to floorboard. When my daughter's car pulled into the driveway, I saw her silhouette through the mist and felt something unclench in my chest. She stepped onto the porch without knocking. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from a night with no sleep. She still wore the same clothes from yesterday. You knew it would come to this, she said softly. I hoped it wouldn't. She held up the folder of documents I'd given her the night before. The edges were creased now, like she'd been holding it too tight. I went through everything. There's no mistake, is there? No, I said. He built the whole thing on lies. She sat at the kitchen table, same chair her mother used to sit in when the world felt too big. I thought he loved me, she whispered. He loved what he could take through you. The words landed between us like falling ash. She didn't cry right away. She just stared at the old photograph above the mantel, me, her mother, and a little girl with a sparkler in her hand. I wanted her to be proud of me, she said. She is, I said, because you're here now facing the truth. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. The police called this morning. They want me to come in for questioning. I nodded. They just need your statement. Tom and Marcy are making sure the evidence clears your name before it hits the papers. Her gaze met mine. You did all this? I just followed the smoke. We sat there for a long time, listening to the house breathe. Finally, she said, He's not going to take this quietly. No, I said, but he won't take it from you again. Outside, tires crunched on the gravel, a car door slammed. My daughter stiffened. It's him. Elliot's voice echoed before he even reached the porch. Lauren, we need to talk. I stood,